Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to the Mesa City Council study session for the morning of Thursday, September 22nd. All of our council is present with the exception of Vice Mayor Duff, who is unable to attend this morning and is excused. The first item on our agenda, item 1A, is a presentation and to provide direction on the Parks, Recreation, and Community Facilities Comprehensive Master Plan. Andrea, we're looking forward to getting caught up on planning for parks and everything else.
Good morning, Council. Andrea Moore, Parks, Rec, and Community Facilities Director, and with me is Teresa Jackson from our consulting firm that helped us with the master plan, Barry Dunn. So we want to give you an overview. This has been a long process. Could you go to the next slide? Of just what we've been going through for the past year plus in gathering input from the community, evaluating what we have in place now, and figuring out where we have gaps in service. So we hired Barry Dunn in May of 2021 and started a process of doing surveys with our staff, and then went out into the public from September to December through a series of meetings to gather input. We also, during that time, had a survey done of our existing facilities. And in May of 2022, we were able to present the findings from that outreach process to the Parks Advisory Board. Then we went through a process of creating drafts of the master plan document that's attached to the agenda item this morning, the whole document. And in July 2022, the Parks Advisory Board received an overview of that, similar to what you're going to receive this morning, and they are recommending adoption of the comprehensive master plan. So in terms of our outreach efforts, in that fall of 2021 time period, we had a series of stakeholder interviews. So those were groups that we partner with fairly regularly, like Arizona Disabled Sports, Visit Mesa, groups like that. We had a couple of focus group sessions. One was with youth sports groups, another was with teens. We held a series of community workshops. There were 6, one in each council district. We had a total of 127 residents attend those, and that outreach effort was done in conjunction with the Climate Action Plan outreach process. So we were able to draw people into those meetings for both input on the Parks Plan and input into the Climate Action Plan future steps. The results of those interviews and meetings helped us create the citizen survey and what types of questions were important to the community. So then we did the statistically valid survey, and altogether we had random selected addresses that submitted responses to that, as well as people who self-selected, who were able to click on a link and complete the survey online. For the most part, people that are already aware of our services. So altogether, we had 2,400 responses to that survey, and that again helped create the foundation of understanding where we have gaps in service and where people are interested in seeing our department grow and expand in the future. All of this has been posted on our project website, Footprint Future Mesa. That's been active through this whole process. It's still there now. The draft of the plan is there, the outline of our findings presentation is on there, all of that documentation's there, and people have been going to that website to receive updates as they've engaged with us through the process. So that's been our outreach process, and I'll turn it over to Teresa to talk through the actual plan findings and recommendations.
Thank you, Andrea. Mayor, Council, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. This has been a very fulfilling project to participate in. Just a couple of highlights about the department that I really think is important to recognize. Your department is held in very high regard as an award-winning department, a gold medal award-winning department with the National Park and Recreation Association. And some of you might be aware that that conference is taking place in Phoenix right now. And in addition to that, the department's accredited. So it's in a field of only 199 other agencies who deliver park and recreation services. Oh, I apologize. So I just want to highlight that your department is held in very high regard, and they're a very high performing team, and it's just been a pleasure to work on this project. So this effort was not done alone. So Barry Dunn was the lead firm involved, but we had 3 other firms that supported this effort. So first we incorporated J2, which is a landscape architect company that assisted us with providing costing on any park amenities or components that we felt were needed to be updated in the system, or additional ones that might be needed in the future. In addition to that, we had RRC out of Boulder, Colorado, who facilitated the statistically valid survey. And we had a firm named Buena Vertas. I'll often refer to them as BV. They did a review of 17 of your vertical assets. And so they went into those facilities and they did a top to bottom assessment of the conditions of those facilities. So for today's purposes, I want to focus really on the strengths and opportunities in the system. I am going to hit on 7 of the overarching goals that are an outcome of the planning effort, and I'm going to highlight some of the action items. There were over 80 action items developed. This is a 20-year comprehensive plan, but for today's purposes, I'm really going to summarize those so you get a sense of how they support those overarching goals. So as it relates to strengths and opportunities, I'm going to first talk about level of service. How are your parks, your facilities, and your pools serving your community? And are there some gaps that need to be addressed? Then I'm going to touch on your recreation programs. Also going to look at those commercial facilities and the opportunities there. And then lastly, those vertical assets. So starting with the level of service. Early in this process, we had a team that went out and visited all of your parks. So they went out to the parks and they took a look at all of the components. So those playgrounds, those shade structures, athletic fields, things of that nature, and they graded that so that there could be a clear understanding of the quality of the component. From there, they mapped all of the parks and all of the components within the park so they could really identify not only where people have access to a park, but what they have access to. In addition to that, they collected information on all of the other service providers. So 1,200 other service providers were identified, and those were also mapped. Those other service providers, such as your HOA, their HOA parks, they really fill a gap in the community. The goal of a park and rec agency is to have a park facility within a 10-minute walk of an individual's home. And in order to do that, those HOAs have to participate. Those parks are serving a role. So we also wanted to identify all of those. So some of the findings related to that work is we found your parks are very well distributed. Over 95% of your population has access to a park facility or a recreation amenity within a 10-minute walk time, which is something to really celebrate. Now, diving a little deeper than that, we want to make sure that there's equitable recreation access within the system. And so we took a look at generally what do most individuals have access to. And we identified that the typical is about 5 recreation amenities. So that can be a combination of things. It can be a trail, it can be a playground, a shade shelter, a ball field, and maybe a pool. So what we found is 69% have access to 5 park components. And so we took that information, we said, well, how do we get the whole community access to 5 components so that we're being equitable? And so that's where some of these recommendations come from, and I'll share some maps here in a moment. So we also took a look at those aquatics facilities. We did some mapping there, and generally they are 2 to 3 miles apart from each other, which is a wonderful spread, which is really around where we want to be at that 3-mile mark. There were some gaps that we'll talk about later in the presentation. Additionally, the individuals that went out to the field, they found your parks are very well maintained, and overall the components are in excellent condition. Now, as it relates to opportunities, so we did identify that there are some opportunities for a more consistent visitor experience. So there are some components that are due for an update, and there are some parks that are due for a refresh. So again, that you have that consistent service level, and I'll hit on those later. Additionally, Developing a true replacement schedule for your playgrounds and your courts. You have upward of 70 playgrounds in your system, and so you want to have those on a replacement schedule so you aren't in a situation where 10 are due all at once. So looking at how you can budget to always replace 2 to 4, depending on size of the playground each year. And that's the same with your sports courts. Also, there's an opportunity to formalize your trailheads. We found through the statistically valid survey that trails are very valued in the community. And as the team was out there, they noticed there are these trails that exist, but they aren't well identified. So let's make sure your public knows what's there and available. There's also some opportunities for conservation through some turf reductions that we've identified.
I'm sorry, is there a distinction between trails and bike ped paths, right?
We have mapped both.
Okay.
Mayor, in this context, we refer to them the same. So
Okay.
the canal paths are what we're talking about is
Okay.
we haven't signed where you can access those very well. And so that is one of the recommendations to this plan.
All right, thank you.
So when we talk about that target value of 5 recreation amenities, when we started to map who has access to what, this map in front of you, and I think you have a paper copy as well, those areas that you see in orange and red are the areas of the community that don't have access to 5 components or more. And you'll notice this is really heavily in West Mesa. And there's the orange or the red. The red we have prioritized because of the population that's there, as well as we took a look at the diversity index, as well as the income in the area. So we've prioritized those red areas as needing more recreation amenities available, outdoor rec, followed by those orange areas. We've also identified through the process that taking a look at some of those parks, those areas, there are parks nearby, but there's pedestrian barriers. And so our rule of thumb is if you wouldn't take your 8-year-old son or daughter or your 80-year-old grandparent across the street, or wouldn't let them go across the street on their own, it's a pedestrian barrier. And so in some of these cases, there might be modifications that could be made that would really open up a community to a new recreation amenity. Also, your team is very innovative, and they started talking about the heat in Arizona. Sometimes it's not a pedestrian barrier, it's just that, yes, it's a pool or it's a splash pad, but because of the heat, the route is just too hot to take. And so what can be done to also include cool routes as well as safe routes? So taking a look at those indoor facilities, you do have a limited number of indoor facilities for a population of your size. What you see here in the kind of cream color is it's a radius of up to 3 miles to a community center. And then what you see in the coral is 4 to 5 miles to a recreation center. Those white areas down in Southeast Mesa, it's over 5 miles to a rec center, also up north in that triangular area. Generally, with a recreation center, we like people to have access within 4 to 5 miles. Where it can get a little tricky is that in large communities, it starts to be drive time. How long does it actually take you to get 5 miles across the town? But we identified you do have some gaps there in the center of the city, as well as the southeast quadrant and northern part of the city. So aquatics, I mentioned earlier that overall, really great distribution. What you're seeing here on this map is those purple icons represent your publicly owned and managed facilities. What you see in blue is all those other service providers, because we do find value in the service that they're providing. We want to acknowledge them to not duplicate services. So the light blue radius, that's a 0 to 3 miles to the nearest pool. So you can see that light blue is really spread all over the city with the exception of that southeast quadrant there.
Real quick, just looking at the southeast part, a lot of the, like, it looks like you have one of the aquatic centers at Cadence highlighted, but that is a private only for the residents that live within Cadence. So there is no public aquatic centers anywhere in District 6.
In the southeast there, yes. And this map is intended to acknowledge that ideally, with how your current level of service is and how they are distributed every 2 to 3 miles, you would want to mimic that down in the southeast to ensure there's that public opportunity.
Ms. Bilder.
So because we put our pools at our Mesa Public Schools, that would be why there's probably not any in the southeast currently. Like, does Gilbert Public Schools do pools at any of their schools?
They do a few, mostly in Gilbert though, but there's none out in District 6.
So would we ever do a pool not attached to a school?
We've been talking with Queen Creek about putting a pool at the school out in Eastmark, at Eastmark High School.
Oh, okay.
That's probably 10 years out.
Oh, okay.
We've noted that as a recommendation to pursue that conversation.
Hey, Chris, the pool at Skyline, wasn't that paid through a bond? The bond that we're going to make the big aquatic facility?
Right, life sales tax.
Yeah, and same with Carson and
Yeah, so
Eno and.
going back to the original point, almost all of our pools are jointly done with the school district because it allows for them to have some beneficial use for their swim classes, their swim teams, and then we get to split some of the costs, and then we obviously get to have those during the summer. So that's worked out well just because of the facilities that are there. And so that's why you see that, and you're right, and I think that's our strength in our relationship with Mesa Public Schools, but obviously Mesa's grown outside of that school district. So, and I think Kevin just mentioned, we have been having conversations with the other school districts about locations and where possibilities are. I'm pretty certain, well, we know Queen Creek would love for us to be on their campus, and I think Andrea and the superintendent have already picked out the location at the Eastmark location. So they're just waiting for a time for us to build it. So that's a great relationship that we have with our school district. So yes, that would be how our aquatics program would most likely play out.
But not necessarily like at Desert Ridge High School for Gilbert Public Schools? Like, have there been discussions about that? Since that's more centrally located and.
Mayor and Councilmember Spilsbury, it would be an overlap with Skyline in terms
Desert
of
Ridge and Skyline.
It's, yeah.
Okay.
area of service.
Okay.
And they do swim at Skyline and
They
at
do,
Brim Hall.
right, yeah.
Depending on what's going on and what time of year, but there are Gilbert schools in the Mesa pools.
Yes, okay.
As they need them.
Okay, so shifting gears into recreation programming. So we found that overall, your recreation offerings have an 81% fill rate. That's a very strong fill rate. Most of the agencies I work with are more in that 70% to 75%. So the classes that you are offering are very well attended overall. Many of them are at capacity and have wait lists, especially in their realm of aquatics. So this is something to celebrate here. Then additionally, as it relates to special events, through the survey as well as community engagement, we heard that your community loves your events, it's meeting their needs, and it's something that they're very proud of. As it relates to opportunities, so we did hear in the survey that 52% of your residents would like to see more programming related to nature play or things associated with the natural environment. And so there's some opportunity there. The way we pose the question is programming meeting your needs? And there's a variety of categories. And is the program important? So with this nature play, it was high importance and not meeting the needs. So there's some opportunity there. We also heard from survey respondents that 40% say that the overall programs aren't meeting their needs. So that's an interesting statistic there because you have this great fill rate, but 40% of the community says your programs don't quite meet my needs. And so there's some opportunity there to potentially diversify your program offerings, but in addition to that, looking at where your programs are located. Because how your facilities are spread, it may just be a matter is there isn't a willingness for the drive time involved to attend the programs.
Mr. Freeman, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give me an overview of the environmental nature-based programs that you're suggesting?
Sure.
Do we do them currently, Andrea?
We don't have many. The park rangers are starting to add more of that type of programming into their outreach efforts. But I think the survey is pointing out to us that we have lots of room to expand.
Yeah, I know we have the Greenfield Park that has the fishing area there. Is there other, okay, so let's talk about the environmental nature-based programs.
So it can take a lot of different routes. I do find that many agencies will partner with nonprofits that specialize in this. But it could be something as simple as Saturday morning family hikes, where you have a naturalist who's leading the hike and who's talking about the natural environment overall. There's also the opportunity in park design to develop more natural play spaces.
I think some of our parks, I'll just use the Park of the Canals, for example, has a lot of historical attributes there that could play in. A naturalist or naturist could provide some type of programming and guiding through the Park of the Canals, why it's even there and why we preserved it.
Agreed. And our more recent park developments definitely integrate more of the natural desert environment into the park design so that people in a more urban setting can interact with desert environment more so than just green space, turf and trees, and have some of that experience in a safer environment where they don't feel as at risk being out on a trail in the national forest area, for example. But the park rangers do scorpion hunts at Red Mountain Park through the summer.
They come to my house.
We're doing guided hikes with our athletics staff, actually, a different type of sport program for adults. And I think the opportunity, the point is that we could do more.
Yeah.
And there was a school, Mark, up in northeast.
Zaharis,
where we
next
did
to
the
Desert
nature trail.
Arroyo.
Yeah, that's.
And there's an outdoor classroom there.
That's a classic, probably example of where we've done that.
Right.
And you have a nature garden, botanical garden at Park of the Canals. I'm cherry picking that one because it's kind of three purposes. You've got a playground, you've got the canal system, and then you have the botanical part.
Right. There's an
that's pretty
orienteering
cool.
course in there as well. Yes. Lots of opportunities like that.
Of course, we have Mesa Grande. It's not in the parks, but it's on the museum side.
Yeah.
Which is, it's that.
I just want to understand about the nature environmental programs that you're proposing, so thanks.
Thank you. Okay, taking a look at commercial facilities, a lot to celebrate here as well. You recently entered a public-private partnership with Paragam Golf, and the year-over-year golf rounds has increased annually since that agreement was put in place. Additionally, as it relates to the convention center and the amphitheater, from FY16 to 19, your average revenue was around $3 million each year. For FY22, you're looking to exceed $5 million. And so coming out of COVID, both sites are doing very well. Additionally, just in this past fiscal year, you developed the Office of Special Events. So you're ahead of this planning effort, already knowing the value those events bring to your community. Additionally, you had that recent expansion of the cemetery that was much needed. So some opportunities in this realm is the convention center and amphitheater. They are both well-maintained facilities with improvements happening on an annual basis. There is, however, some opportunities to modernize the facility, and you'll hear some recommendations related to that later in the presentation. Another opportunity is continued expansion of the cemetery. You do have an undeveloped quadrant in the southwest, and so that's something that you're going to want to have on the radar in the long term, that you will need that future expansion there. And then most recently, the addition of the post is going to provide a wonderful community space. And with your convention center, it's trying to be so many things to so many people. And so maybe that will alleviate kind of a community desire to use a unique facility. So just briefly on those vertical assets, we took a look at the 17. There's many, many more than 17 in the system. Your team is maintaining over 9 million square feet of city-owned properties within the Department of Parks and Recreation. And that is something very unique to your department here. In FY 2021, the team responded to over 6,000 work order requests. But there's some opportunities there. We are recommending the development of a facilities master plan to have a more holistic approach to facility management. We also are encouraging really transitioning from responding to maintenance needs to being in more of a preventative maintenance type mode.
When you say there's 17 vertical assets, that's just in the Parks and Recreation area, not all of our assets.
No, Mayor, we're at about 400 vertical assets that we maintain, but we had the a sampling of the 17 buildings where we did a building assessment as an example of how we would want to proceed with a master planning effort across the whole facility inventory.
So the 17 buildings were just kind of randomly?
Just sampled.
Just sampled, okay.
Right.
There was quite a bit of thought, and Andrea can elaborate on the buildings that were selected. This building was included, but trying to include buildings from each department of
Okay.
the city, as well as a number of the recreation facilities, and also kind of looking at the best of the best as well as the worst of the worst. So it really gives a broad perspective of what's taking place in that world. Okay, so moving on to recommendations. So a lot of these recommendations, you're going to hear the connection to the work that we've done here. So as I mentioned previously, there's 7 overarching goals, and there are a number of action items that support those goals, well over 70 action items. So again, I'm going to keep it somewhat high level for today's purposes, but the first goal really relates to providing a consistent, exceptional park and rec facility experience throughout the system. And so I did reference that there are some parks in the system that are due for some replacement of components, as well as just a refresh or beautification project so that they have the same look and feel as your other parks in the system. So they're providing that consistent experience. We also identified 18 playgrounds that are due for replacement in the next 10 years. And so we've prioritized that into short-term, mid-term, and long-term for you, and included some cost estimates related to that. There's also an opportunity to update your park standards. The National Park and Recreation Association uses what they term modes of service, and it's just a way of looking at developing a park maintenance routine that's really based on the use of the park. And so we have some recommendations related to that. The next aspect is to continue the development of a well-connected system that provides equitable access. So there you saw on the map that you do have areas of the city, primarily in the west, that don't have access to the same number of outdoor recreation opportunities. So we're recommending some large and small scale park improvements to your existing parks in that region to help increase the number of opportunities that residents have access to, trying to get them also up to those 5 components. Additionally, looking at those pedestrian barriers, are there any modifications that are possible to increase access across the city? We want you to continue with this. You've got a lot of wonderful planned park projects in the future, and that's going to help with your service level, so continuing with those. We've also identified some opportunities to expand your trail network, so areas where you can increase connectivity a lot along the canal there. And then this one I haven't touched on yet, but I wanted to highlight it as an action item. So we are recommending a feasibility study for the Fremont Aquatics Center. So that site was selected as an asset that BV evaluated. And it's an older facility, and it is coming due for a number of renovations. In addition to that, when you look at the attendance levels for open swim at your pools, it does have the lowest attendance level. Now, it's very tucked away, and it's an older facility and doesn't have all those bells and whistles that the community has become accustomed to. So doing a study here to determine, is it in the best location, and is it appropriate to pursue these renovations or look at building new somewhere else? So this recommendation map you do have in front of you. So this is intended to summarize where we are recommending various actions take place. So the green icon is just those existing park development projects that are in the works. We wanted to identify those so you can see where those are in comparison to other recommendations. The blue icon relates to aquatics. So we've got that feasibility study we're recommending there at Fremont, and then down in the southeast, taking a look at the possibility of adding aquatics facility there. Then I referenced those 18 playgrounds that are due for replacement. And so those are identified with the diamond shape, and you can see those are somewhat spread across the city, but we do have a high volume there, again, in the west area. And then the last icon, purple, is additional components. And so you'll again notice there's quite a few in the west. We are trying to leverage your existing park properties to increase service, because that's definitely not an area of the town where it would be easy to acquire new land for a park. Oops, excuse me. Okay, so the next goal, deliver quality programs for residents of all ages and abilities that are equitably distributed. So this is all in that realm of programming. So we're recommending further diversifying your programs. Again, 40% of survey respondents said programs don't meet their needs. And so something like adding the nature play opportunities can really start to diversify what you're offering. Also recommending trying to take advantage of your outdoor locations so that you could distribute programming. Now, obviously, time of year will make a difference, but taking a look at what opportunities exist. We also are recommending a feasibility study related to the addition of a recreation center, the size and scale of Red Mountain. Taking a look at whether there's a deeper dive into the need and what an appropriate location would look like. And through those feasibility studies, they also identify the most desired components of a facility, as well as the appropriate size for the community. And then last, we have develop a nature in your neighborhood type program and identify and create park areas that can be utilized as nature trails and areas. So looking at goal 4, this is really about staffing and contract support. So your community is continuing to grow, I think somewhere around 80,000 in the next 10 years. So you have this existing level of service. We've done a lot of analysis on how many FTEs you have per 10,000 people, what your per capita spending is, and just really trying to maintain that as you add facilities, as well as increase in population. So we wanted to highlight some things also related to the Cemetery Convention Center and Amphitheater and advancing those operations in Goal 5. And so here we're pointing out that future expansion that will need to occur there at the cemetery. Also highlighting that because the Convention Center and Amphitheater are servicing so many needs, a community space, a place for trade shows, a place for convention business, trying to generate revenue, hotel nights, that really there needs to be an annual review of booking policies so that they can be very nimble and make sure that they're serving the community as best as possible. And then last here, pursue the development of a strategic plan for the Convention Center and Amphitheater with an emphasis on market and demand, site analysis and sensitivity and gap analysis. So really looking at how you can expand those operations and how the facility is serving those, the current convention business and what opportunity is there into the future. So goal 6 is really related to those vertical assets. So use innovative processes, methods, and procedures to maximize efficiencies and effectiveness of vertical asset management. So your team is currently using CityWorks as its work order system, and we are recommending the team continue to expand that use, not only for work orders, but to really support preventative maintenance and being able to get every asset into the system. So you're thinking more about what those preventative needs are than being reactive. So that's a key aspect there. We're also recommending the development of a facilities master plan, and I referenced that earlier. 400 buildings, 9 million square feet, really a document that provides strategic direction and a really holistic approach to how those facilities are managed. And then tied to that, a policy document. So really outlining those building maintenance standards, how contracts are managed, how custodial services are overseen. You've got a lot of departments that your facility management team is servicing. So goal 7 relates to strategic partnerships, which I haven't spoken much to, but the department and the city has a number of very strong and very valuable partnerships. And so here we're saying let's continue to maintain and expand those partnerships where we can. And a couple of things to just highlight. Some of those partnerships have been in place for well over 30 years, and lots of turnover happens. And so we're recommending that with all of those key partners, that there's an annual sit down to go over what's working, what's not, and what are the opportunities for future collaboration to make sure that it's working on both ends and it still makes sense how it's designed. We're also recommending that opportunities be explored with the county to establish a trail north of Red Mountain to the Haas Trail system. As it relates to MPS, that's a very important relationship, right? There, specifically with your aquatics world. And so there is some need to maybe clarify roles and responsibilities there. That's one of those agreements that's more than 30 years old. So sitting down with them and making sure that everyone understands what their piece of the pie is. In addition to that, where we have gaps in service, talking to MPS about what are the opportunities to open schools after hours to fill that void. And so expanding that partnership there. And then next we have that Queen Creek School District in developing a pool in Southeast Mesa, so pursuing that partnership. And then being open to additional public-private partnerships. Building a rec center might not be in the cards, so what opportunities are there for partnerships to expand your indoor facility needs? And then lastly, to increase your nature-based play, looking at partnerships. It doesn't all have to be produced by the department. There's experts in that field that can support that effort. So our last goal relates to funding and diversifying funding sources for long-term financial sustainability to maintain consistent community access to programs, facilities, and services. And so here we do have pursue a bond for funding park and facility projects specifically to address gaps in service and maintain your level of service. Remain open to those public-private partnerships. As it relates to cost recovery, many of the programs fall into this partial cost recovery goals. Really defining what that means and looking at the different benefits that various programs provide. And then lastly, as the population grows, again, I've hit on this, and just maintaining the general fund per capita spending and the staffing levels so that you're providing that same service you're providing today.
How does our per capita spending on parks compare to other communities?
It's actually strong. I think when we did the comparison with the National Park Recreation Association, you were about $1.40 below communities of the same size, which is about an $800,000 budget gap overall.
So you said about $1.40 below the average?
Yes.
Okay.
And I say that's not bad because I have seen it where it's upward of $10, so you're in that realm. And I think our budget analysis was pre-addition of your special event office.
It was.
And so that doesn't include that money that's been infused into the department recently.
I'm sorry, can you say that one more? I didn't.
So we've added the special events office and added additional resources for that. And they're saying that calculation is done prior to that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So those FTEs will increase your overall general fund budget. So kind of just in closing here, looking at future financial needs and where priorities are based on the outcomes of this planning effort. Really, we've highlighted the need for an indoor facility, potentially in the center of the city, north or southeast, because you've got a gap there. Looking at the aquatics map, again, you see that gap down in the southeast, and so looking at that as a priority. And last but not least, this area of West Mesa, where you do have a lower level of service than that of the rest of your community. And first focusing on those two red areas that have really been identified as priority because of the populations that are there. And with that, I'd like to open it up to any questions the council has.
Mr. Luna.
I know that you've partnered with Mesa Public Schools for many years. Are we running the programs or are they running the programs? There was a distinction in the past of who actually ran the programs. So are you suggesting that we're going to continue doing that, or how's that work?
Mayor, Councilmember Luna, both entities,
Okay.
City of Mesa and Mesa Public Schools, run programs. Some of them are very similar, some of them are different in terms of athletics, after-school programming, summer programming. There's definitely room to have a more coordinated effort with Mesa Schools, but right now we are both doing things, like I said, in some ways very similarly, and in other ways they're completely different programs.
And so as you look at partnerships, are you expanding to the Gilbert School District as well as Queen Creek to use their facilities for, after-school activities?
We mainly have summer school, or summer camp programs, and we do locate some of those in Gilbert schools already. Definitely is an opportunity to have more in Southeast Mesa,
Okay.
which is where that district there are a couple of locations now. There was opportunity to expand further there.
And I was pleased to see the Haas Trail because you're going to work with the county to try to get that moving forward. I know that's something that's very much of interest in Northeast Mesa. And also the Falcon Field Air Park. What kind of improvements are you looking at there?
Falcon Field is due for a new playground and some overall irrigation upgrades to improve the turf condition there and be able to support the larger events that we do in conjunction with the airport there.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Freeman.
I'll take a couple of shots. So, Andrea, is our programming for our youth sports at maximum capacity?
Mayor, Councilmember Freeman, no, it's not. It's something that we're continuing to evolve out of COVID. So we had teams that were very popular pre-COVID. A lot of that shifted into more clinic-type opportunities coming out of COVID, and now we're going back to more of both types of opportunities, teams, clinics, camps. It's more of an introductory level into different sports. And then just the model of service that we typically offer is anything that's more skilled, higher level of play would go to more of a team sport, club sport type situation outside of city offerings.
Okay. I guess my other question is the reservations request outpace the availability of our park system?
I would not say that it outpaces it. There are locations like Riverview that are very popular and booked out many, many weeks in advance, but it depends on the location.
Okay. Because I remember, the last couple of years, sometimes we don't have enough park availability based on the demand. Sports and teams wanted to use our parks and schedule our soccer fields and our sports fields.
For sports fields, yes. We are still underserving the demand for youth sports field use. But what we have about to open at North Center at Lehigh Sports Park and the expansion at Red Mountain and the fields at Monterey, those were all part of the 2018 bond program, and those will make great strides into meeting more of that demand.
Okay. And I just wondered if some of the private enterprises like Bellbank Park, has that impeded anything? Has that stopped any teams coming to Mesa or using our sports fields?
No, because we don't have enough field to meet the current demand.
Okay.
And so it is not something that's impeding use of our facilities. It's helping to meet the need.
Okay.
Right, and mostly we focus on those who live in our community as far as
Right.
programming, whereas Bellbank Park would mostly be bringing people in from everywhere, right?
Tournaments and
Not just specifically Mesa, so.
I know there's several local teams using Bellbank just because of the availability and they can't get into our parks or get in our reservation system. But that's okay. That means we're utilizing our sports fields very, very well. So I think that, and again, I like the collaboration we have with our Mesa Public Schools. I mean, that's awesome. A lot of our buildings are from prior, public schools that we've taken in and, renovated them and put them into field use. And I appreciate them. And so I look forward to working with the other school districts and other parts of our community. So thanks.
Ms. Pillsbury, then Mr. Reddy.
Yeah, thank you so much for this. It blows my mind that you're over this many things, Andrea. So it's so much to try to keep up on and maintain. Was part of this study at all, the, I don't know how to say it, the different types of basketball courts, pickleball courts, soccer fields, like those types of offerings and where we would need more of those particular things? Was that part of the study?
Yeah, so as part of our level of service work, beyond identifying what your typical level is, we did some comparison on National Park and Rec standards. So there's some park metrics that are out there as to how many are typical of an agency this size. And so we were able to identify categories that have a shortfall. There weren't many. I want to say maybe pickleball was
That's
on there.
specifically why I was
And then the other one is a capacities analysis. So looking at the number of individuals a park amenity should service in those
Okay.
quantities. So that's in the document as well, and there weren't too many shortfalls there either.
Okay, I didn't really see anything particular that, so, because my district's full of neighborhoods and families and parks, and this is wonderful, and I really appreciate all this. I get a lot of questions about pickleball courts, and wanting more of them, and also some neighborhoods wish they had a basketball court in their park, or, you know, something to that effect, where they have a park space, they have a playground, you know, it's great, but they want, you know, additional amenities or whatever, so I didn't know if that was part of that, so. And I also appreciate the work with the school district, and there are so many opportunities that could be there for future partnerships, so thank you so much.
A couple questions. Curious on like the West Mesa gaps where we have, there's very little land there. Just curious on kind of what types of facilities or kind of vision in those areas where we can fill in the gaps. I'm assuming just, you know, it's heavily dense, but there's not a room to maybe build a park or just the space there. So any thoughts there?
Well, a couple that stood out is we did take a look at the parks that are in that area and what park amenities or components could be added to increase the service. And so we've recommended some specific components, but we also recommend that you're working with the community to make the best selection. Because, for example, we might see that you're lacking basketball courts and identify a basketball court, but that's not what the community wants. So we've made some suggestions based on the size of the parks. And so that's the purple icons on there, I believe. You'll see they're kind of speckled in the west. So we've got some suggestions there. There were a couple of potential locations for future parks, but really trying to add those components is a best first step in the short term. And we also recommended some activation. So trying to put programs in those parks to revitalize what you have there and provide another opportunity that's not a physical structure.
Okay. The other question is kind of those going to that, like high impact, low cost maybe. I don't know, in Monterey Park or Kevin's district, we're adding that library piece. Is there things that we can add that kind of are high impact pieces to our parks, especially larger parks, that can add kind of that piece that you're saying, additional amenities? For some time, I was asking about, you know, little libraries we have in neighborhoods, but could we look at pieces in our park system to add those components maybe, or whatever kind of high impact, low cost pieces that could add just differential offerings for folks?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, we've identified where that gap is, and there's lots of ways to fill that gap. And that partnership with the school district and seeing what's possible with opening specific schools to provide more recreational opportunities is one that a lot of agencies have moved to. You've got an existing partnership, they've got a playground. Why not open it up to that community? Additionally, sometimes you might not hit that 5 component mark, but you recognize internally we have something very special at that park. So it's not always about 5 because we've done something unique and special with high impact here.
And Councilman, just quickly, I know Andrea's been in conversations with both the arts and the libraries about creating displays, I'm not sure.
Exhibitions in the park system.
In parks that kind of link those together. So those are some other areas of bringing in other amenities into the parks.
And that's a great opportunity for passive recreation, and that is an opportunity.
Yeah. The other piece I didn't see, like technology upgrades. Like, do we have sufficient technology for people to interact with our park system? Is that a gap that we're missing, or is that okay? I'm just not sure on the. I just didn't see if we need to improve that, or if you know, it seems like folks, the usage are on their phones to maybe sign up for classes, to request a Ramada. Is that a gap that is there, or are we doing fine on the technology side?
So technology often raises to the top. We'll hear from community members they can't easily register, or we'll hear from staff that a recreation software system isn't meeting their needs. That wasn't something we heard here. Registration doesn't seem to be a barrier to access, and the team seems very content with the tools that they have overall. So there weren't any specific technology upgrades that were recommended.
Okay. And then last question on, is there opportunities, is there other examples of maybe static revenue streams that can come in our facilities, like thinking of the amphitheater on signage, digital display boards, maybe some of the higher usage, like thinking like Fiesta Sports Complex, where you can maybe put up a digital display board for ads, or and work on public-private partnerships to add some revenue that can help improve some of those parks. Is that does that happen in other park systems, or what's the capabilities of our system to kind of absorb some of that those pieces? I know that it comes with pros and cons and challenges, right? But is that something that can be looked at as maybe adding to this plan?
So this plan is somewhat high level. It's that 30,000 foot view of the system. So there are some references to further developing those public partner relationships. You have some in place, but there is likely room for growth in that arena. Your neighbors in Gilbert have pursued a number of those in order to increase their service. And so that is an opportunity for the future to develop a formalized program, and it could take the form as marquees and things at some of your facilities. But in other areas we've seen where a private entity will come in and, well, perhaps the public agency will build the facility, but the private sector will run the facility, and then the agency will receive 3% of revenues. And so there's a lot of different formats that are out there, and I do think there is some opportunity for that because it is well established here in Arizona.
Okay. Is that something that we're looking at, Andrea, on the maybe like food service, ads, or other kind of static, or other revenue streams in specific parks maybe that are highly utilized, that are maybe maximize opportunities like that?
We do offer sponsorship opportunities for static signage.
Okay.
I will say we looked at digital signage in the amphitheater, and the cost to install something that was outdoor resilient was so high that we wouldn't have recouped the cost through the sponsorship opportunities. We also let the little leagues that are based out of our sports complexes, though, take some of that sponsorship revenue during their season for signage on the outfield fences. Anything that would point outside of the facility wouldn't be allowed on our zoning, though. So we need to be careful that we're doing that type of thing internal to each park location.
It goes to another conversation you and I are having about signage.
Yeah, there's opportunity for revenue on digital signage that I think there's, that's several other additional meetings to talk about. Wow, this is a little overwhelming. This is something we're really good at, and I appreciate that. And so I think that's, like you, I want to begin by saying we're very proud of the great job that our parks program is doing. And this is we talk about how it's got to be, Mesa's got to be a great place to be a kid, and this is, you know, the front lines of where we do that work. So thank you to you and the army of people that make this happen. But having said that, you know, I think it's I'm anxious for us to get better and to continue to address all of these needs that we have. So I think it's important that I appreciate Mr. Rush from the Parks Board being here. I think I'm anxious for the Parks Board to work really hard and to give us some suggestions on future park bonds. The fact that we aren't, that we're slightly below average in terms of per capita spending on parks, I think is a green light for us to not be shy about going to the voters and saying this is something that's important to you. That's why you live in Mesa, Arizona, and so let's double down on this and let's make this continue to make this a point of pride in our community. So I'd love to take this wonderful document that you've worked on and turn it into an action plan. It sounds like you already have to some extent, but let's go to the Parks Board and say, okay, 2024, should we do a park bond, and what rises to the top? Is it the Eastmark Pool? Is it, a list of whatever it is? Is it an indoor recreation facility, in West Mesa and North Mesa? I mean, it's all of the above, right? The challenge here is prioritizing how are we going to eat this elephant one bite at a time, right? So let's engage the Parks Board to do that, and for the next several elections, I'd love to see a park bond on. And I know part of the challenge here is just managing, right, your capacity, our engineering department's capacity, our ability to do all of these things. We can't do them all at the same time. So we need to, I don't know why I'm telling you this. This is this is what you're telling us, is let's figure out this plan, how we're gonna get to the utopia that we want to be. I think part of it is because things are so expensive, I appreciated what you said earlier, that we could be better at coordinating with our school systems. Mesa Public Schools is a huge organization in and of itself with a huge budget, a huge number of facilities. Sometimes they complain to us that they feel like they have more facilities than they know what to do with, and so that's their challenge. So I'm anxious for us to, if we need to get better at coordinating, I'd love to have, some city council / school board meetings, and where we resolve anything that needs to be resolved, so that we're working as closely together as possible. And sometimes I think the folks at Gilbert Public Schools and Queen Creek Public Schools, it's not at the top of their mind that, a fourth to a half of their kids live in Mesa, Arizona, and so we need to, have the same close relationship with them that we do with Mesa Public Schools. So I'm anxious to play a role in that, and to just make sure that at the leadership level, there are no conflicts, and that we're working as closely together as possible, because given that we live where we live and the temperatures that we deal with, it seems like a no-brainer that we need to have more indoor facilities. I think it's great that our programs are 81% full. I wonder if that's too high. I mean, maybe that means, but at the same time, 40% of our folks are saying, yeah, it's not quite what I want. So I don't know, we need to figure that one out, right? Mm-hmm. I know personally, my family, my daughters, are complaining to me that they have to set their alarm, get up early and to get into the programs that they want to get into, because they feel like that. So I know you're good at figuring that out, but we need to maybe figure that a little better. How do we overstaff in the areas that sell out, in a half an hour, and figure out what to do with the ones that aren't that popular. But I appreciate the fact that they are so popular. The aquatics program, I think, has always been one of our strengths at the City of Mesa, and I have my own personal opinions about the Fremont Pool. I think you ought to bulldoze it. It is hidden. If you tell somebody I'll meet you at Fremont Pool, good luck, with them finding it. But that's not to say that Fremont Pool is not critically important to the people who live in that area. So we need to work with Mesa Public Schools and build it front and center out on, the city. The Mesa Public Schools owns everything out there. So they could very easily find a corner, a very prominent corner, like the Mesa High Pool.
Sounds like the Mesa Junior High conversation.
Yeah.
Well, we put it up in front instead of putting it in the back.
Yeah.
So that area will be underserved when Fremont is no longer part of the system. It needs to be replaced with a Red Mountain High School pool or something like that. So, and again, I apologize. I'm telling you things that you guys know more than I do, but I support that. And the Eastmark pool, again, I'm 100% committed to that. We've been talking to Perry Berry and that school district since before that school was born, and there is a beautiful prime piece of property that's been earmarked for that. We just need to hurry and get it on a park bond so that the people in that part of Mesa can enjoy the Mesa Aquatics program, which is why a lot of us live here. It's so great. The other thing that, again, is obvious, but trailheads and canal paths are one of our strengths. And so we just need to make sure that that's as functional and as it can be. We've got some beautiful trails, but sometimes they don't connect with each other. So the more coordinated that is, the better. The whole Haas Trail situation, I think we need to explore the idea of not only partnering with the county parks department, but also with Tonto National Forest. I would love it if maybe there was a City of Mesa facility that is not in the City of Mesa. It's on the Tonto National Forest, and it's a trailhead, it's a parking lot, that's literally almost across the street from the City of Mesa, but it's if you drive out to that part of Mesa on any weekend, it's not safe because the entire, you'll go for a mile because there's trucks with people pulling their mountain bikes out, and at some point, it's just not safe. So that's where people want a facility, and that's where we need to figure out how to partner with the federal government and the county so that they have it. I'm sorry, I'm giving you a presentation. I didn't mean to. The convention center plan, again, is critical. I know the folks at Visit Mesa would love to help us with that. But that's that stretch of property that the city owns, starting at the Mesa Arts Center and going all the way up to University. That's an amazing, every city in the country would kill to have, a swath of land like that in the heart of their downtown. We just need to make sure that it's very well planned. And I love the Mesa Convention Center. I'm not advocating for huge changes there. I think it's a sweet spot. It's just the right size. We're not going to compete with downtown Phoenix or with, but let's figure out what we're good at and preserve that. But there's unused property there that's very strategic that can be used better. And so I guess all of this is, I want all of these ideas to be vetted at the Parks Board and for you guys to come back to us with, here's how we're going to eat this elephant. These are the park bonds that we're proposing over the next several elections so that we can continue to be really good at this. And it's okay for us to entertain the idea that maybe we spend slightly more than average, per capita on parks, so that this can continue to be a point of pride and a reason that people live in Mesa, Arizona. So thank you very much for the important work you've done. I look forward to you coming back and asking us to put this on some elections so that we can move forward.
So, Mayor, for now, we will be returning on October 3rd.
October 3rd, we have a resolution on your agenda for adoption of the plan.
And so, Mayor and Council, over the next year or so, you'll start receiving, this will be one of the first ones you'll receive a master plan. We have a transportation master plan going on, have a couple, economic development, others, because they're all going to fold into that general plan discussion also that we'll be having, really going into after January. We'll start having some significant discussions about the general plan and updating the general plan so that it'll show up on the November 2024 election. But all of these pieces, including transportation, the parks, transit, they all fold into that general plan. So we'll have you start adopting these subsets, these portions, and then we'll fold those into a long-term, just kind of longer vision as this all heads towards the general plan update. But as the mayor says, they become informative too, whether it's the parks plan or the transportation plan, in discussions about future funding and strategies to do that in the future. And we'll have those discussions probably as we move into every discussion at the beginning of the year with the council and our strategic planning process. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, council? All right, thank you very much. We really appreciate this and look forward to doing more.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda, item 1B, is a presentation and to provide direction on the design and budget for the new Southeast Mesa Library. Polly, good to have you back with us. Hopefully Beth is going to brought her checkbook with her for this.
Yeah. Well, or I'm going to ask you for the checkbook. Just one second. All right. For whatever reason, it's not getting in there. Sorry, just give me a minute here. All Well, good morning, Mayor and Council. We wanted to come visit with you this morning about something we haven't done in 35 years in the city of Mesa. Polly reminded me of that this week, and I said, really? And we started looking at it, and that is the case. We have a new library that we are currently nearing completion of the schematic design phase. And so we have some concepts we want to review with you and talk to you about, and also some costs and some schedules, which are kind of my area of expertise. I have with me Polly Bonnet with our really awesome library services director, and I'm Beth Huning, city engineer. I'm gonna walk you through the beginnings of the projects and the costs. Polly's gonna walk you through the really fun parts, the programming and our vision for what the library should look like, and then I'll wrap up with some schedules and where we're headed. So to begin with, you all will remember in 2018, the public was very gracious and voted for a bond election for us to build a new library in Southeast Mesa, which is in need of those services now because it's rapidly growing. We had $16.8 million on that bond election. That estimate is now over 4 years old. And as I know you're all very well aware, we've had unprecedented growth in the cost of construction in our valley. And so that number is very stressed. When we originally talked about this, you can see the site is located at Ray and Eastmark. And we were looking at a library that would be on the order of 30 to 35,000 square feet. So truly a full service library. As we've gone forward, we've developed several concepts, and our first concept was in the order of 32,000 square feet, which put us a long distance over our budget. So we came back and we looked at one that would get us under budget. Unfortunately, getting under our budget would reduce the square footage to about 20,000 square feet, and we'd lose about 40% of our programming. So what we wanted to come to you today with was an in-between option that gets Polly and her staff the programming that they feel that the community really wants and needs in this area. And that option is at just a little over 28,000 square feet. So it's kind of a in-between option that still gets us all the programming. And the other thing we looked at was, is there a part that we could phase into the future that we could build when there's additional funding available? And that, where Polly's going to talk a little bit about, would be the Think Spot option. We've designed that so it's kind of completely independent, and it could be added later if you wanted to.
So, Mayor and Council, let me just clarify. So we're presenting to you a reduced scope of work. This is not the original plan that we went to the voters with, of the 30,000 square foot library, but when we got those estimates back, what was that number?
It was like $7 million over.
$7 million over. So we had to go back and make some tough decisions. So we went to the point where we said, okay, let's take it, strip it all the way back. And I think we're close. You said 20,000.
20,000 square feet.
And it wasn't the library. It would have been much less anything that we had talked about to the community. So we're trying to find the sweet spot. And so and Polly go through it. So while we have seen some reduction we have received reduction in square footage, and we're going through this exercise with all our 2018 bond projects, whether it's museums, whether it's the post, whether it's the libraries. We're struggling with public safety buildings. So this is a theme you're going to be hearing. We set aside some dollars in our last budget, knowing that we were going to have some inflationary pressures. So we set aside, I think it was like $10 million, Brian, something like that. So it's not, I mean, we're going to present to you something that's outside of the bond, or what we discussed in the bond program in 2018. We do have a little capacity, but we've got to spread that capacity over several projects. So again, we're trying to come back with a reduced scope, and then maybe some add alternates, so that if we get, this is a pricing that we're getting now, we don't know what it'll look like when we go out for bid. So anyway, it's still a great project, but it is not the same project that we presented, the 30,000 square foot project that we presented. And we're going through that exercise with all our projects right now. Okay.
For me, since it's only something we do once every 35 years, maybe we could do the build out to 30,000 square feet to give the capacity that the library truly needs and what we told the citizens we'd give them. I know it's an exercise we'd have to go through and look at.
Right.
And I know the architects would have to go back to the drawing table per se, but again, it's something we only do once every
No,
35
agreed.
years.
And I think we've
it might
set
be
this
worth
up so
building it
that we've
out.
allowed for phases to take place too, so we
Yeah.
can meet that commitment if we need to.
Awesome.
And we're doing that with all our projects, that we're trying not to completely abandon the original plans, but we're saying sometimes we may have to spread this out over a period of time. And yet, even the reduced scope is still over the budget that we had originally discussed. And it's not that, when we hear that, but this was a plan that we put, it's 4 years old, well, we made assumptions 4 years ago that we knew we weren't gonna do these projects the following year. They're gonna be 4 or 5 years out. We just had no idea the rate of inflation, the increased inflation was much greater than what we ever anticipated. We built that into our estimates, but we didn't come close to anything that's happening today. So, okay, sorry, go ahead.
So if we look at our budget and the 16.8 million we have today, the option we're going to present to you today is kind of with and without a ThinkSpot. Because the ThinkSpot, what we've done is we've made it kind of wholly independent. It's integrated into the structure, but we can build it later. We could use it today for kind of a courtyard and then build it in later when we're ready, similar to what we're doing to the add-on at Dobson. So today, the floor plan we're coming to you with is a 2022 estimate is just over 21 million, where we have a shortfall of about 4.5 million. And I'll hedge that up to 5 because prices are fluctuating right now. We have seen some reductions in steel and wood, but we are really seeing increases in electrical, mechanical, and trades of all kinds as they're getting swept into the chip projects that are out there. If we add in the ThinkSpot alternate, today's price is about 1.2 million, and I think, if I remember correctly, the ThinkSpot would get us up to the 30,000 square foot. I think it was about 1,800 square feet for the
We're pretty
ThinkSpot.
close, yeah.
So then we would be almost 6 million over budget if we add the ThinkSpot back in.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but ThinkSpot is super cool, right? I mean, I think people are blown away when they walk into the library and they say, what do you mean I can do all this cool stuff? It's not the normal thing that traditionally libraries have done. So I'm a big fan, but my question is, how much is it utilized? I mean, is it a small, group of people that are kind of geeky and come in and love it, but then, 90% of library users don't know or care about it? I mean, to what extent should we prioritize ThinkSpot?
Mayor, thank you for the question. That is a good question that we're always looking at, and the use changes over time depending on what the needs of the community are, because it's used for very specific purposes. For example, the foundational services that we offer are children's, teen, adult. Those are the things that we know we want to bring to the community where there's a demand. And ThinkSpot kind of augments those services or is an added value. So we can still program with ThinkSpot concepts in mind and have a programming. If we didn't have a dedicated space to ThinkSpot, we could still offer programming around the ThinkSpot equipment, if that makes sense. So there would still be a presence even if there wasn't a place there. And as we go into the floor plan, you'll kind of see we have a multi-use space that we could utilize ThinkSpot programming, ThinkSpot equipment. But to answer your question, it is not as heavily utilized as our foundational services, but it's something that does attract people in, and it's used for very specific reasons. One thing that we're looking to develop further is our VR programming, and that's very much tied to ThinkSpot, and we see a demand there. But it is so specific in its use that it's not to the same level that you would find our other more core services. And
Ms. Pillsbury can talk to this better than I can, but the schools are telling us now that we're having a crisis in literacy. Our third grade reading scores are terrible as a community. And so I think we need the the community needs to step up and embrace literacy as a priority, and the library program is, that's the way we do this. So I would love to double down on kind of the core mission of the library, because we desperately need it. So I don't want to shortchange the library at all, and the more library, the better. But I just wonder if we need to just kind of go back, take a step back and say, wait a minute, we're spending money in places other than what is the most important mission of the library.
And when we get into the floor plan, we'll show you here, but we paid special attention to the children's library for that reason. We know that that is kind of the heart of our services, and that's where lifelong reading or lifelong learning and a love of reading is born. So we definitely are paying special attention to the children's library in this community, and knowing the families that are in the area, the young children that are in the area, we definitely want to make that a focus.
And Mayor, I think you remember, we first added ThinkSpot out at Red Mountain, and that was very popular. And then we saw how well it was done, and we did it at Maine for kind of focus more on teens, it seemed like. And you're right, it's not constantly, but it brings in people that may not necessarily come to the library, and then therefore we're at Dobson doing the same thing. So it's become kind of this level amenity of services that, especially, it's maybe a specialization, but it seems to be attractive, and so all the libraries would have it. So because of this, the interest, I think the feedback we got from the Eastmark folks, that was why it was included. So it would be similar to the level of services providing the other libraries in the city, but we've also put it as an alternate, meaning it's going to go through the design, it's going to go through the bid process, but we'll have the option once we get the bids back from the contractor to decide whether to go for it or not. And so that's how we're presenting it to the council today.
And it could be added later, though.
That's right, and if it's not funded, then it's built in such a way, or it's laid out in such a way, we could add it.
It's kind of a wholly separate building with a different roof, but it slides in under you'll see the roof design here shortly. It slides in under that roof design. The graphics we're going to show you today actually has the ThinkSpot shown on it, and what Polly pointed out. But it's in an area where we could do like a little meetup space or a courtyard type thing in the interim, because it's towards the front of the library. So as you come in, if you're meeting in a group or you got a little team showing up to work together, you can use that area now in the meantime until we build the ThinkSpot.
And Mayor, I think when we had our public meeting, and Polly, you can probably speak to this, I think the ThinkSpot was one of the primary things that the residents wanted. And then was it the teen or the children's that were like ranked right up there with it? I know that there was another one of those. I thought it was the teen area. They wanted that area expanded as well.
Right, with the teen feedback, we did do a focus group with teens also, and that got a really good response. I do want to mention that ThinkSpot, we're nearing our 10-year anniversary, if you can believe it, with the first ThinkSpot at Red Mountain. And along those lines, the interest in the community, I do want to share a story. I was told recently that someone who used ThinkSpot just graduated from ASU in robotics, and they were introduced to robotics from a VEX program at the library in ThinkSpot. So that was pretty exciting to hear. And they're now looking at an internship at NASA. So cool. Wanted to share that with you. So those programs, again, it's so important to what we provide, also those different technology tools that some people may not have access to, that we would have that presence regardless if the space is added at a later date.
Excuse me, Polly, Mr.
So Polly, I'm obviously a proponent of ThinkSpot. I think it promotes digital literacy. It allows, especially the teens, the preteens, the ability to do podcasting, to create their own videos, and it just broadens so many opportunities. It's a real draw, especially to that type of demographic. So I think, if we can, unfortunately we don't have a lot of money available to us, but I think this is something that we really need to push, because it really is a draw for teens, especially there are so many kids that are using their telephones and have a space to be able to do that and to do podcasting and those kind of things. It's critical, I think. So a strong proponent for this.
And definitely when we were looking at the space, we did have to make those hard decisions of what is our core services and what do we need to provide, and then what would be that added value that we could provide. And that's where ThinkSpot became a phased-in option, so.
We reduced quite a bit of the community space though, right?
Yes, we
So
did.
there was at one point, what do we call it, community room? Larger community room, and we've reduced that completely, or not completely, we've reduced that significantly. And so then ThinkSpot became the next opportunity to try to bring us inside a budget.
Right.
Yeah, and let me just clarify, I support ThinkSpot. I think it's innovative and wonderful, and I'm all for it. I just think that we need to make sure that we put first things first, and we try to figure out what is the role of Mesa Public Library in responding to the literacy problem that we have as a community, and put that at the top of our
So, Mayor,
list.
to your point, I think that to your point, we would agree because you don't see that we've reduced that space, right? In an effort to try to bring this closer to the budget, we didn't touch the teen and the children's space. That was left, and it's pretty close to its original size, or is that fair?
Actually, a little bit larger.
Okay, so
slightly.
I think, Mayor, to your point of prioritization, I think that's acknowledged in the footprint. What we're trying to do is find other options where we've reduced kind of the community space room, and now we're putting, at least as an alternate, ThinkSpot, and we had to work with the design team to make sure it was in a position where it could be either deleted or added at the time when we get the guaranteed pricing from the contractor. So we have that option at a later date.
And the facility is one thing, but I think maybe the programming is another. So it's not, Polly, I'm sorry you're here. I'm going to get off topic slightly for this building, but I think I'd love to see the library board come back to us and say, hey, here's how we're partnering with our schools to address the literacy challenges that we have. And this is a great building, but how are we going to program it in a way that's going to address those needs? And frankly, the eSmart community is probably not top of the list of places having literacy problems, but it's more of a citywide concern. But so I'm off topic, but there you go.
No, I'm glad you brought that up. We did, Mayor and Council, we did just hire someone who will serve as our literacy liaison for the library system, and they're going to be working with the schools directly and other organizations to make sure that that is a priority in our programming and see where we can support, what role we play in supporting literacy in Mesa. And I know that Sarah Tolar, our new workforce and education and workforce administrator, has already been reaching out and working with this person. So
Thank you.
All right, so here's the floor plan. I'll do just a quick overview. It was planned as a single story to kind of optimize that programming space that we have. And in the center, you see the salmon color, what we're calling the marketplace. And the idea of a marketplace concept really grew around attracting everyone to a hub of activity under a shared roof where you have these points of discovery off that main center point. And when we were talking about it, it's like, what a great analogy for what a library is, drawing people into this common shared space where it's a hub of activity and you have different uses, multiple uses in the space, and encouraging that sense of exploration. So, and Beth, would you mind that first slide there? I wanted to walk through that space a little bit. Thank you. So this is your first point of entry inside the main entrance where we're standing, and you see that marketplace area. We wanted to maximize that connection between the inside and the outdoors. You see those high ceilings and the windows to the outside space. If you walk directly straight on the right side, that goes out to the west to the playground, to the park area and the outdoor space towards the playground where the orange monster is. You can kind of see it in the distance there. And then to the right is the children's area, the entrance. And then that middle section there is the service desk. That would be the main connection point for that area. And then over to the left, you walk towards the lake there into the outside, and you'll see the adult space and teen zone to the right.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, this is a unique setting for a library. It's got a pond, a lake on one side, community centers, big open park space with playground space further out. So it's really is a beautiful site for a library.
That connectivity was so important to us that we did provide those multiple connections to all the surrounding amenities, because it is an amazing opportunity to be in that surrounding. Okay, thank you. And then this is another view into the marketplace coming from that south side from the lake as you go towards the north, and Basis is on the other side of the library there. In this space, we would have some of our more specialized collections, like our Stuffbrary, our Seed Library, our culture passes, and then some interactive technology. And then on the left, you see where the adult space would be that kind of provides those stacks, the perimeter of that space and the more quieter use for the adults. Okay, and here's the floor plan again. I'll kind of walk you through that quickly, clockwise. So at the top, we have our staff area, and that currently is planned for about 20 staff members. And over to the bottom left of that space, it's kind of a darkish salmon color. We have a sensory room. We wanted to support Mesa's designation as an autism certified city, and Dobson Branch has been the first autism certified branch. So we're building on that and providing a space that would take those needs into account and have a private sensory room, so we can build off of that. And then if you move downwards to that yellow portion, that's the ThinkSpot alt add-in that we've talked about. And then to the bottom right, that's our community space. It's more of a multi-use space. So that's where you'd find our programming, our larger children's programs, teen programs, adult programs, and then the community could use that space as well. And then over to the left, that green space is our adult area. And just to the south, you'll see a highlighted portion that will show you in a little bit more detail of the reading patio, which we're really excited about, to have that view that adults can go out and read and continue having library services outside of the building. Then to the north, that tan area is our teen zone. As Councilmember Thompson mentioned, that was something that was important, especially in that environment with the high school so nearby. We have Basis. Every time we've been on site, there's a ton of teens in the area. So having that space defined for their own use, and they did request kind of huddle rooms. You see that on the left, and that's more for homework and other collaborative purposes that they might want to use them for. And then at the top, that purple portion is the children's room. And that is kind of the heart of the library, even though it's not in the heart of the library. And how we would program that is towards the top left there. It would be programmed out in zones, similar to our children's library at the main branch, where it's zoned out for age-appropriate activities, so from the youngest up to the tweens. And at the very top, kind of that hat there in purple, is a dedicated story time space, program space that we would use for our smaller programs like Baby Lapsit, Toddler Time, and those other types of programs. And around the perimeter, tying into that marketplace concept, is that roof line will expand over the building itself to have that outdoor connection where we can do programming outside too. What we heard earlier with the parks, that interest in having outdoor programming, that was something that was so important as we built, or as we designed around this, that we could have that outside connection and provide those programs outdoors. Okay, and this is the first view, one of the renderings of the main entrance. You see that dramatic roof line there, and kind of the point over on the right that draws you into the main entrance. And that middle portion, again, is what the ThinkSpot portion would be if that was added on. And as Beth mentioned, it would be a courtyard area that we could still program in the meantime. And where those palm trees are, that's the plaza area. So there would be parking in this plaza, but it could also be used for programs where we could complement other activities happening in the Great Park, or partner with Parks and Rec, Steadfast Farms, and have larger programs in that space. And this is just a closer view there. And then this is the southeast view from the parking lot, expanded parking lot. And here you see kind of that first indication of the outdoor reading patio. We like to think that the roof line looks like an open book a little bit, and it also covers the patio. And then you see the landscaping that defines the perimeter of the library space. Okay, and there's a better view there of that outdoor reading patio. One thing we love about this design is the transparency and the visibility into the space where you can see all of that activity and also that connection into the outdoor space. We wanted to make sure there was a synergy between those two spaces. That wall, that first wall that you see kind of defines the patio area, and then that second small wall was intended to attract maybe park users who aren't using the library, that they were still able to take advantage of that outdoor space that was created from the library site. All right, and this view is one of my favorites, looking from the lake towards the library. I think here, one of the main things that was important to us, and it's been mentioned in the conversation with the parks too, is providing this public space, taking advantage of other community assets that exist in the area. And I think having this setting, we're so excited about this setting because it can be a place-making opportunity. And this is something, Mayor, you mentioned a point of pride, that would be a point of pride in the community and draw users from the Southeast Mesa area. Next up.
So with that, what you're seeing today are our concepts, our schematic designs. We still have a ways to go with picking out materials. We have a contractor on board, and we need to balance. We want the building to be professionally elegant, and yet we want it to be something we can afford to build. So we balance those when we bring the contractor on board. So we've got some work to do to get through all the materials and some of the details left and get it through design. I think we had our board, we presented to the library board this week. Mm-hmm. And you today, there is a public meeting next week on the 27th. We would, if you're amenable to the concepts and going forward with the additional funding, we would look at completing design mid next year, going straight into construction. Hopefully we would have a GMP to you before the break next summer, starting in the fall and then completing in the fall of 24.
But Beth, we'll come back with a GMP with that alternate.
Yes, we will.
And we'll be able to make that decision about whether that will be included or not.
Very exciting. I do have a couple of questions. I agree with you. The setting here is amazing. It's very unique. It's going to be, this will stand out as one of the, a real point of pride, one of the best libraries in the country, I think, just because the way it sets in. And even if you go there today, you know, the pedestrian traffic is crazy. I mean, but that's because this sits adjacent to an HOA facility, right? And Eastmark HOA is an amazing place to be. So that's great that we're kind of piggybacking. The only flag that raises for me is we want to make sure people understand this is a public facility, and
Right.
and if you're not a member of the Eastmark HOA, this is still your library,
Yeah.
right? And that you can, it's signed appropriately so that people don't feel like they're trespassing on HOA property if they come and utilize it. And now the Great Park is a public park, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is.
And so, I mean,
Everything around it.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So I just worry that people might feel like they don't belong in this
So,
place.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
We've tried to avoid using the word Eastmark.
Yeah, we're not
And so-
calling it an Eastmark library.
But you're right, Mayor,
now
we'll
we're
have to-
calling it
I understand
this.
that.
Yeah.
We need to make sure people understand this
Yeah,
is not
we-
the Eastmark Library.
We all
This
agree
is-
with you.
yeah.
We agree with you.
I wanted to say too, I didn't get called on. Did you want to call on me? Am I allowed to just, sorry.
No, I'm not.
I forget my place sometimes. Can
Really, but
I?
you have anything to say?
Yes, thank you. Can we call it the Mesa Southeast Library instead of
Well,
the
actually, I think
Southeast
we're working on
Mesa?
some names, so
Okay,
we'll come back
that's-
with council on that. This is just a placeholder. We just didn't want to start off with the
Okay, I thought we were
Eastmark.
calling it Southeast, just because the Repair and Preserve what is?
Preserve.
That is the Southeast
Southeast
Regional Library, that's part of the Maricopa County Library District. And so that's why I was not loving Southeast Regional and Southeast Mesa.
Right.
So I'd rather have Mesa, and so all the signage says Mesa Southeast or
Okay,
whatever.
well,
But-
I think we're gonna come back with some ideas on
Okay.
naming, but that could be one.
Okay.
I mean, it's generic enough, it emphasizes, we agree, we're
Right.
trying to make this so that anybody in Mesa can come to this public library, yeah.
Hey, Beth,
Mr. Yes.
on these, when you're doing the cost analysis, does it make sense to just build everything out? I know we're looking at costs, and
If I
when
don't get the finger.
you add the Think Spot, it adds 1.2 million per the slide, but does it make sense just cost-wise? I'm assuming costs are not gonna go away, right? If we build the other piece, 4 years from now, it might be just the same or more, and then added the construction kind of downtime that staff has and all these things. So does it just make sense to build a shell and maybe outfit it maybe later, just to have it ready, or just based on costs?
So Mayor, Councilmember Heredia, I would tell you that normally I would tell you it's better to build it now because you've got mobilization, you've got the contractor on site, there's an economy of scale in materials and subs. I will tell you though, we're not quite sure I don't think there's anybody right now willing to project where the market's going. We're hearing from some contractors it's starting to take a bend down in materials, and in some areas we are able to get concrete and asphalt now, which we weren't 6 months ago. And I will also tell you, I've lived through 4 economic recessions in the construction industry, major ones. And in 2007, I would have told you prices would continue to go up, but by 2008, we'd seen them tank to the lowest levels we'd seen in years. So I would be hesitant to say it'll be cheaper in the future or more expensive. But you do have economies of scale, and you have mobilization and stuff that you could share in the cost today.
And Councilman Reddy, the challenge we're facing though is everything is overpriced. Everything. And so there's a impact on the budget, right? And so we're trying to treat every project kind of the same way, where we're saying, listen, we've got to find either way to phase it, add alternate, scale it, and yet they're still over budget, but we're still trying to figure out how to accommodate that. If we just try to absorb, and we're trying to keep every project within the confines of its original estimate and maybe bring it down a little bit. So all those 2018 projects are going through the same exercise. We're doing it in public safety. We did it at the post. We're doing it at the library. We're trying to do it at the museum. So everybody, we're trying to find a template that we can use for all of them to kind of say this. Now, I think we're also trying to set it up that we can do phases if we need to, or add alternates. And granted, you could argue, well, maybe it's more convenient to do it now, but you do it at the cost of paying so much more that it puts pressure on the other projects that are still yet to come, and not having the funding to do those. So that we're trying to balance all that out.
No, I totally get it. But I think sometimes we don't realize that as far as when we make these decisions, just the downtime that you shut down maybe libraries, or, it's such a public facing piece, right? That you're stopping traffic, and so later on, how that affects and what that cost is, it might be an expansion, then it's just saving maybe 250,000.
Yeah.
And we're losing,
Your point is well taken. I think in Dobson, you're right, that it has created a huge inconvenience.
Yeah.
I think the way this one is set up though, we could do it without having to interrupt the regular flow. But Dobson, you're right, it has been a very painful process to add that, because we're right there in front, right? So, yeah.
All right, is this an action item?
So, Mayor, well, we just want to make sure we're giving direction because we're moving down this path. You saw what Beth said. It is not just, I want to get the nods, the heads, we're proceeding in the right direction. We'll come back to you before we make the final contract decision, and we'll bring to you the numbers on that ad alternate and decide whether to proceed. We'll have more information about some of these other projects that are also in that 2018 bond, whether it's the Idea Museum, whether it's the Post, public safety, because we're trying to, like I said, in the budget, we set aside $10 million, but you can see quickly some of this is getting eaten up quickly. So we're just trying to manage all that. But we just want to make sure you're good with us. We want to present to you the design. I don't think many of you have seen all this, and roll forward and then can come back to you again before we make final decisions.
I really, really love the outdoor space. Like, I want to be outdoors like all the time. Is there any way to add outdoor space to our main library? That's just a big box.
Yeah.
So we just need, like, is there room we could add some outdoor areas with some comfy couches?
Mayor and Councilmember Spilsbury, wonderful question. We are looking at options. Actually, we're looking at activating that outdoor space behind the library. It would be more for children's use.
Okay.
So we do have a door in the children's area that does open out onto the back lawns. We're looking at what design opportunities are there that we could have an outdoor children's programming space also.
Okay, I know it's not that cheap to just throw up some shade or whatever, but I think that's what people want. I just drove by a gym yesterday that had a whole outdoor gym area, so people could work out outside, but it still was all fenced off. Anyways, people just want to be outside, so I love that. Thanks.
Thank you. I agree, there's some underutilized space there. Obviously, we've got to work, there's challenges with public access to that space, but I think it's a great idea. We ought to explore that. Anything else on this item, Council? Thank you, Polly and Beth. We appreciate it. Look forward to seeing this happen. That really is going to be one of the most beautiful libraries anywhere, I think.
Thank you so much. I agree.
Next item on our agenda, item 2, is current events and conferences attended. Council members, anything you'd like to share with us? Mr. Freeman?
You know, I was impressed at our promotions award that we went to for police department. You know, some of our officers got promoted in administrative personnel as well. But in that, I learned that Officer Paul Trance had saved someone at Lindsay McDowell on a motor vehicle accident. The individual riding the motorcycle was a police lieutenant from Phoenix Police. And so I went yesterday morning at 0600 Fiesta District, and Phoenix PD showed up with about 12 of their personnel, their assistant chiefs and commanders and et cetera, and awarded Officer Trance a heroism award and thanking him for saving the life of the lieutenant that was severely injured. And it would amazed everybody because he was able to speak to us, and he spent 7 weeks in the hospital, and he does not remember a thing. People came and saw him, visited him. Phoenix PD wrapped their arms around him. Mesa Fire wrapped their arms around him and helped him, as well as Mesa PD. But he just said, "Thank you very much for saving my life." And that was award that was done at shift change yesterday morning. So the recognition for Officer Paul Trance with Mesa Police is just awesome, and I appreciate his service and all that our public safety guys do. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I appreciate you letting me, I missed the last 2 council meetings, a study session and a council meeting. I was actually working, just so you know. One of those days I was in Washington, D.C. at the White House on a panel with other mayors, 2 or 3 other mayors on hate-fueled violence. It was a very important meeting. I'm glad that Mesa could be there represented. Sadly, Mesa has the distinction of being the first place where we had a hate crime following 9/11, 21 years ago. This is the murder of Balwar Singh Sodhi, a gentleman in our community that was shot and killed because he was wearing a turban 4 days after 9/11. So I think that was part of the reason I was invited to be there, but it was a very important conversation, and I'm glad we could be a part of it. And then Monday night, I was in Houston for a national voter rights conference with the other mayors, and privileged to serve on a panel there and to introduce the luncheon speaker, who was Speaker of the House, Rusty Bowers, talking about his experience in voter rights. And so Mesa in Arizona was well represented at that conference as well. Next item on our agenda is schedule of meetings. Mr. Brady, what does that look like?
We'll see you next Thursday, Mayor, for our next study session.
All right, thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Mr. Luna and Mr. Thompson. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. We are adjourned.